The colony ship drifted through the void between galaxies, and Lieutenant Daniel Cross stood at the observation deck watching stars. Blur passed the reinforced glass when she appeared beside him without a sound. Her skin shimmered like polished silver. Under the dim lighting in her eyes were twin pools of deep violet that seemed to contain entire nebulas within their depths. She wore the standard diplomatic envoy uniform, but somehow it looked different on her alien frame, more elegant and dangerous. "All at Onsami name is Kiara," she said, and her voice carried a musical quality that made his pulse quicken. "I am here to negotiate terms of passage through our territory." Daniel had been briefed about the Zephyrian delegation, but no report had prepared him for the reality of meeting one face-to-face. The Zephyrians controlled a massive stretch of space between humanity's desperate refugees and the promised world they sought to colonize. "Appreciate your people considering our request," he managed to say while trying not to stare at the way her long silver hair seemed to move as if underwater. Kaya tilted her head in a gesture that was almost human, but not quite your species. "Fascinates me," she said, stepping closer until he could smell something like cinnamon and ozone radiating from her skin. "You venture so far from your dying world with such fragile ships and bodies, yet you do not hesitate to have no choice," he replied. "Earth is gone, and the backup colonies are failing one by one. Is our last chance." Shesh reached out, and her fingers hovered just above his hand, not quite touching, but close enough that he felt a strange warmth emanating from her skin. "Your people feel emotions so intensely," she whispered. "It is intoxicating, too." "Be near Udinal," swallowed hard, unsure how to respond to that. The mission briefing had mentioned that Zephyrians were telepathic, to some degree able to sense the emotional states of other beings, but feeling it firsthand was entirely different. The following weeks, Kiara became a constant presence on the ship. She moved through the corridors with a grace that made hardened soldiers stop and stare, and she seemed particularly interested in spending time with Danielthi. Met in the observation deck most evenings, where she would ask him endless questions about human culture and customs in return. She told him about her people, about worlds where mountains floated in the sky and oceans burned with cold fire. One night as they sat watching a distant supernova paint the darkness with colors that had no names in any human language, she moved closer until their shoulders almost touched to where "Captain believes we will deny you passage," she said quietly. Daniel felt his heart sink. "Is that true?" Kiara turned to face him fully, and her violet eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "My people's council is divided. Some see humanity as a threat, a species too reckless and emotional to be trusted with access to our space. Others see you as curiosities, nothing more than interesting specimens to study." "What do you see?" he asked. Kutch leaned closer until her lips were near his ear and whispered, "I see potential, Bear," he could ask, leaving him alone with his racing thoughts and the distant dying star. The next day, Captain Lisa Morgan called an emergency meeting. The Zephyrian Council had sent their decision. Humanity's request was denied. Their ships would have to find another route, one that would add years to their journey and likely result in the loss of thousands more lives. Daniel found Kiara in one of the unused cargo bays. She stood in the center of the empty space, her arms wrapped around herself in a gesture of distress that looked heartbreakingly human. "You knew," he said, and she turned to face him with liquid shimmering in her eyes that might have been tearsy. "Argued for you," she said, her voice breaking. "I told them about your courage, your determination, your capacity for love and hope, but they fear what they do not understand." Wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at her people for condemning humanity to a slower death. But looking at her obvious pain, he found he could note. "It's not your fault," he said, stepping closer. Kiara shook her head. "You do not understand," she said. "My people do not feel as you do. We are logical, cold, calculating, but being near you, near all of you, has awakened something in me that I did not know existed." "What are you?" Saying Shay closed the distance between them in one fluid motion and placed her hand against his chest right over his heart. "This," she said, "your emotions, your passion, your refusal to surrender, even when all hope seems lost, it has infected me, changed." Daniel covered her hand with his own, feeling the warmth of her skin through his uniform shirt. "What happens now?" Kiara looked up at him, and for the first time, He saw something fierce and defiant in her alien features. "Now I do something my people would consider madness," she said. "I am going to help." Yush explained her plan in rapid whispers. There was an old treaty between the Zephyrians and another alien species called the Korvax. The treaty allowed for political asylum seekers to be granted safe passage through Zephyrian space, but we are not asylum seekers. Daniel pointed out. "Will be," she said. "If I claim that I am defecting to your people and request asylum, then the treaty states that any ship harboring me must be granted passage. It would make you a traitor to your own Piopla?" Myra smiled, and it was a beautiful, terrible thing. "Yes, it would." Neil shook his head. "I cannot ask you to sacrifice everything for Yusua." "Are not asking," she said firmly. "I am choosing this. I am choosing." Youth weight of her words hung between them, and Daniel found himself drowning in those violet eyes that had haunted his dreams for weeks. He asked simply. "Beckus," she said, stepping even closer until their bodies were almost touching, "because in all my centuries of existence I have never felt truly alive until I met your kind, until I met Yawuer." Hand slid up from his chest to cup his face, and he realized he was trembling. She leaned closer, whispered, "Stop me if you can," then undressed. Slowly, with a deliberate grace that made his breath catch in his throat, what followed was something beyond physical connection. It was as if every emotion, every sensation was amplified 100-fold. Her telepathic abilities created a feedback loop, where he could feel what she felt, and she could experience his humanity in its rawest form afterward, as they lay tangled together in the dim cargo bay. She traced patterns on his chest that might have been writing in her language, or simply idle. "Gestures me, people will hunt me," she said quietly. "When they discover what I have done, they will see it as the ultimate betrayal thin." "We will protect you," Daniel said, wrapping his arms around her. She laughed softly. "You cannot fight the Zephyrian fleet." "We'll find a way," he insisted, "because that is what humans do. We find ways to survive against impossible odds." Kiara raised herself up on one elbow to look down at him, and her expression was soft with something that might have been love. "You really believe that he have too," he said, "or what is the point of any of this?" Kissed him then, and it tasted like stardust and promises that might be impossible to keep. Next morning, Kiara presented herself formally to Captain Morgan and declared her intention to seek asylum with the human fleet. The captain was stunned, but recovered quickly enough to see the opportunity. "Understand what this means," the captain said to Kirai. "Understand," Kiara replied, "and I accept the consequence." Captain Morgan nodded. "Then welcome aboard, and may whatever gods are listening have mercy on us." Walth Zephyrian Council's response was immediate and furious. They demanded Kiara's return, threatened military action, and declared the human fleet to be harboring a criminal. But the old treaty held, and grudgingly they were forced to allow passages. The colony ships began their transit through Zephyrian space. Daniel stood with Kiara on the observation deck, watching her homeworld grow smaller in the distant shadow. "You regret it?" Sketch took his hand and laced her fingers through his knot. For a single moment she stayed, but her eyes held a sadness that spoke of everything she had left behind: her family, her status, her entire world given up for a species she had only just met. "What will you do?" Daniel asked, "when we reach the new world?" Kiara smiled. "I will learn to be human," she said, "or as close as I can. Managal will always be welcome among us," he promised. "No," she said, "and that is why I chose this bind." The rest of the fleet followed their lead, hundreds of ships carrying the last remnants of humanity toward a new home, and aboard each one stories were being told of the alien woman who sacrificed everything for a species not her owning, who fell in love with humanity and damned herself for their salvation. But those who knew her understood the truth better, had not been looking to save anyone. She had simply been seeking something her own people could not give her: the wild, passionate, chaotic experience of truly feeling Alevian. In Daniel, she had found someone who made existence worth the cost. Here relationship was not easy. There were cultural differences that seemed impossible to bridge, moments where her alien nature and his human limitations clashed in painful ways, but they worked through each challenge together, learning to build something new from the pieces of their different world. Swan, the fleet finally reached the new world, a planet with blue skies and clean water and room enough for humanity to rebuild. Kiara stood beside Daniel on the landing platform and watched the first shuttle descend. Made it she. Said wondering Lydney squeezed her hand. We made it together, he corrected. Him and her violet eyes were bright with unshed tears. Do you know what my people would say if they could see me?